So I'm here to talk to you about Washington, D.C. But not this D.C. I'm here to talk to you about this D.C., regular D.C. And I'm also here to talk to you about a contract that you've signed. Yes, you and you, all of those, I can barely see you. You've signed this contract. And it determines where our children can or can't go to school, the quality of air we breathe, the number of bombs we build, and so much more. And yes, just by virtue of living and breathing and turning an 18 in this country, you've signed this contract. And the basic terms of the contract are that in exchange for being law-abiding, tax-paying citizens, you get certain services and protections from your government. I would say more importantly what you get is the right to vote for the people and the laws that guarantee those services and protections. So some of you may have guessed by now, but the contract I'm talking about is one that for hundreds of years political philosophers and civil rights leaders have coined as our social contract. Now, not every country has a contract that holds together for 240 plus years. When I was just 3 years old, I came to the US with my family. And my parents came here from Colombia because they had lived through a period of terrifying political violence in the 1950s, where people would be killed just for walking down the street and talking about a political candidate, much less voting for one. So they left everyone and everyone they knew, everything and everyone they knew, so that they could come here and give my brother and I a better chance. It was later that I came to understand that we came from a region of the world where in many countries, the terms of the social contract are bought and sold. There's no rhyme or reason. You could wake up one day and paramilitaries would be in control of your nation's capital. So though it wasn't easy, they came here for me. And because of them, I wanted to be someone that could help people. So I became a lawyer. But I also decided that I would spend 20 years, and I spent the last 20 years speaking with thousands upon thousands of people about race and identity, and what enables us to feel safe so that we can have the best lives possible, the best communities possible, and the best country possible. Because we have a social contract we can work with. And while most people, most hardworking folks don't wake up across the US pondering the true meaning of the social contract every day, for some groups, like Native Americans, women, immigrants like me and my family, and African Americans, we are viscerally aware of the terms of the social contract. Because remember back there during the birth of our nation, our fellow African Americans weren't even considered fully human. The very first document that crystallized the meaning of our social contract had written into it every possible disadvantage for African Americans. And it was crafted at that time to further institutionalize slavery. And as we have seen recently in places like Baltimore and Ferguson, there's a lot of work we still have to do on our social contract. There are grave defects and bullet holes in the promises of our social contract. Right here, in the place we are sitting, in Washington, D.C., we too are one of the flaws in the social contract. The people of D.C. who live in the nation's capital do not have an equal vote in Congress. This city, one of the first frontiers of freedom, long before slavery was abolished, became a place where African Americans were still handcuffed by the flaws in the social contract. They wanted public education for their children. They wanted a decent paying job, but they couldn't find one. For D.C., the flaws still silence us today. Did you know that even though we elect our local lawmakers and enact our own local laws, that every single one of those laws has to pass congressional review? That doesn't happen anywhere else. Not only that, members of Congress consistently act to repeal local laws. Just this year, members of the House and Senate wanted to repeal our local gun control laws. And we can't even do anything about it. We have no vote in any decision that Congress makes, not one, whether to open a post office or fund Head Start, or on the worst of days, a declaration of war against another country. Now, some will say, but there were good reasons 200 years ago. Our tyranny-sniffing founding fathers didn't want anyone to have undue influence over our national seat of government, so deals had to be made. In the very instant, in 1800, when D.C. was formed, at that instant, for the people living in D.C., the core of what had been fought for, an equal vote and a true voice, it was gone. Interestingly enough, though, for white residents moving to D.C. in the 1800s, they were state-assigned federal workers. They could go back home and vote. They really didn't lose anything. But according to the 1860 census, 15% of D.C.'s population back then was already African American, and over half had been born in this city. So that by 1970, of the 750,000 plus people living here, 71% were African American. So now hold on, because I've taken you from 1860 to 1970 and 2015, where I'm standing with you in a city that I love, where I work for a fifth-generation Washingtonian African-American female mayor who has charged me with enforcing one of the most powerful local civil rights laws in our country. Right here, in what some might call the epicenter of world democracy, where D.C. residents, including me, paid $4 billion in federal taxes last year, we still don't have an equal vote. So the question I want you to take back with you after today, and I really want you to take it home with you, is if D.C. had not evolved into an historically black city, if race did not at all play a role in D.C.'s right to self-governance and self-determination, would we still be denied the right to vote today? And to put my question differently, if D.C.'s demographics were completely different, would we even be having this conversation? Because you see, back there, the British Crown, they didn't want to give the colonists the vote. Oh, what a repugnant thought. They found the colonists to be undereducated, unsophisticated, and a threat. But as soon as the colonists ended their cries for no taxation without representation, they turned around and denied the Native Americans the right to vote. And called them separate nations, but went ahead and stole their land and ended their rights to commerce. And it wasn't until 1913 that women were given the right to vote in this country. It wasn't until 1913, for reasons that now seem so ludicrous. But yes, many men considered women to be undereducated, unsophisticated, and a threat. And it wasn't until the 1960s that most African Americans could have a true vote in this country, and their vote would have changed everything. And yes, you may have guessed it, many considered African Americans undereducated, unsophisticated, and a threat. So now, like the Native Americans, the colonists, the women, the African Americans of our past, D.C. residents are denied a right to vote. We deserve an equal right to vote in Congress. Is there anyone that still believes that D.C. is just an outlier in the history I've laid out for you? Is D.C. really still just an exception? Friends, help me give D.C. an equal right to vote. Thank you.